السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وعلى من تبعهم بإحسان ودعا بدعوتهم إلى يوم الدين، وبعد. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما وعملا يقربنا إليك يا رب العالمين. اللهم افتح لنا فتوح العارفين ووفقنا توفيق الصالحين. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. اللهم إني أعوذ بك من أن أضل أو أضل، أزل أو أزل، أظلم أو أظلم، أجهل أو يجهل علي. رب يسر ولا تعسر وتمنه بالخير، وبك نستعين يا فتاح. آمين. Honorable respected elders, brothers and sisters in Islam, we begin with the praise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We praise Him, we pray to Him, we seek His protection and pleasure, we seek His nearness, we seek His sustenance. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to send His perpetual blessings upon the prophets and messengers, in particular of Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give them khair al-jaza on behalf of all of the Ummah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. May He grant us all tawfiq, the ability, the strength to seek and pursue the path of piety. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Dear brothers and sisters, one of the important things in our deen, as we all have often heard, is to seek the nearness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In fact, not just one of the important things, the most important of all. And it is at the center, and as it serves as the foundation to our deen, because it is all about whatever we do, whether it is prayer or fasting or zakat or hajj or any amal salih, righteous deed, it is merely and purely to seek the nearness and the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Even the reward is not maqsood in itself. What is the end is actually to connect ourselves to the Creator and follow His orders. The rest are the means, they are the mediums. So what is the maqsood, what is the intended goal throughout the life of mu'min in each and every endeavor that he or she may engage in and undergo, then there are certain things that come as a result of this to our attention that we need to be mindful of. Our deen is all about the two things. One is the al-awamir, the other one is al-nawahi. Al-awamir refers to the obligations, the things that we need to do, we're supposed to do, we are encouraged and asked to do. And al-nawahi or al-maharim, things refer to the prohibitions in our deen. Things that are impermissible, that are haram for us as Muslims to engage and do. So this is what is all about. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam in the same narration stated this, which is a bit longer narration, but the gist of it is that al-halal bayyin wal-haram bayyin. Since both of these things comprise our deen and they are the essence of that, so therefore what is halal is very crystal clear in our deen. It is as clear as the daylight. Because when we look at the brightness of the sun, even somebody who has weaker eyesight will be able to see and discern things clearly. And وَالْحَرَامُ بَيِّنٌ, likewise, what is haram is clearly defined, demarcated, and very well explained. There is no ambiguity in it. For example, consumption of alcohol, for example, fornication, for example, gambling, for example, theft, for example, ghiba, for example, namima, backbiting and gossiping and lying and all of those things. Right? And وَبَيْنَهُمَا أُمُورٌ مُشْتَبِهَاتٌ, Prophet ﷺ said, in between lies certain matters that are of doubtful nature, that have ambiguity in it, either because they could be one of the newly arrived issues that fuqaha, they have difference of opinion, or they did not find a clear and very direct nas in Quran or Hadith, but it is through their ijtihad they are going to come to the conclusion. So, وَبَيْنَهُمَا أُمُورٌ مُشْتَبِهَاتٌ. The Rasul ﷺ said after this, these matters that are doubtful, as I have mentioned before, a person of iman, a person of taqwa and piety should even stay away from that, should guard himself against, because they may be serving as a gateway to get into haram. ومن وقع في الشبهات فقد وقع في الحرام أو كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام. The one who has fallen prey to the doubtful matters, they have indeed gone way far and beyond the limitations, and it is very likely that they will lead these things then to fall into haram itself. And then Prophet ﷺ gave an example that in the olden days, in the traditional classical times, usually the kings and the rulers, the area, the territory that they used to rule over, they would have a very defined boundaries. Right? Today we have, for example, nationalities and the geographic boundaries for each country, the nation state, what we call, right? Even this our country, the country of ours, Canada, has the longest border because of the stretch from the very subhanallah west to the east. There is no other country that is as big, as wide as it is, because of this they say the longest undefended border. There are many ways that a person can easily illegally get into the other side. So such boundaries existed in the past in a different manner. They used to oftentimes have a wall around, and anyone who would get in would need a permission and security and protection. So Prophet ﷺ, using this example, he said, "Ala inna likulli malikin himan." So each king has its hima, this boundary. And then Prophet ﷺ, giving this as an example, he said, وَحِمَ اللَّهِ مَحَارِمُهُ. This boundary wall for the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is what Allah has prohibited things. Because this is where a person will get into a red zone. And in order for a person to protect himself, not getting into that, he should even avoid and stay away from things that are doubtful, things that are not clear. Things, for example, somebody doesn't know about the ruling, so before he or she seeks a clear ruling from a scholar, they should not engage in unless or until they know. Not because so-and-so or my friend or my family said it is okay, and you yourself are not satisfied and you don't have a clear knowledge of, then you should even avoid that. So there, Ibn Munzir rahimahullah ta'ala said, even mushtabihat are also different levels in darajat. As I said, one of the examples of that is some issue or a mas'ala that doesn't have clear Quranic or hadith proof in that. The other one is that, for example, you yourself don't know until you acquire the knowledge of it. You must stay away, and then once you have the knowledge, then you can proceed further. So these are some of the examples of it. So the gist of this hadith that I wanted to highlight for today's discussion is the himallahi maharimuhu. My dear brothers and sisters, we, in the month of Ramadan, what we tried our level best to do, and alhamdulillah we all, I'm assuming and hoping that have succeeded to some degree at least, is to stay away from things that are haram, to stay away from things that are
prohibited. And not only that, even things that naturally and generally are permissible for us outside Ramadan, they become prohibited for us during the hours of the fast. Right? For example, the food and the drink, things like that of this nature, which are very essential to human survival. And we make sure, even though there is no one to teach us or tell us or even to see us, we stay away from food and drink from the very time that we start our fasting all the way till we end our fasting. So eating and drinking is not haram, but during the hours of the fast, it becomes haram. So there is this message that is given to us, and in fact, not just one message, multiple messages that we could derive, the lessons that we could learn. For example, the first thing that we learn, when we proved this to ourselves, that I can stay away from food and drink for certain hours, whether it is easy or hard, regardless of that, and when I can make sacrifice of something as essential to me as drinking water itself, which means that I am certainly able to make any sacrifice easily possible, even beyond what I used to think before. Generally, people then come up with this excuse when it comes to avoiding sin, it's hard. Do you think it is harder than avoiding food and drink? Absolutely not. If you think avoiding certain things is difficult, of course it is a challenge depending on the environment and the age and things like that. But at the same time, what we need to understand, it is a shaitani waswasa. It is an excuse from shaitan that, oh, it's hard for me. Of course, things that our nafs allure to and attracted towards is going to be a bit of a struggle and challenge. This is why our Prophet ﷺ, speaking on jihad and mujahadatun nafs, he said, al-mujahidu man jahada nafsahu. The true mujahid is the one who fights against his own lust and desires, right? The evil and ill instigation of one's nafs. So Rasulullah mentioned the one who is able to fight against his own nafs and come over, that is the true mujahid. Because this is the battlefield of your own life. Because the other battlefield is not permanent. Because, for example, all of us sitting here, and we hope and pray, we and also all people are safe and protected. We did not go, and we hope not to go to the battlefield, the real battle, the war. But there is an ongoing battle that is taking place each and every moment in our life. And that is to do what is right and to avoid what is wrong. This is in itself is a jihadun nafs, as I said, in light of the hadith of Rasulullah ﷺ. And that defines and showcases the true commitment and sincerity of the believer in his faith. Because those who fail to do so, that means they have made a verbal commitment without any spirit behind that. And therefore, this mujahadatun nafs is, there's a whole discipline that goes. And we all are equally, because there are certain stages in one's life that it may be more difficult than the other stage, but we constantly need to fight against one's nafs, whether young, old, man, woman, regardless of that. Because we all know that there are times that you can see yourself, you are fighting against something you want to avoid, but you then relapse. As long as you are genuine, as I mentioned before, quest and efforts taking place, with that Allah will give you tawfiq to overcome one day. And with that Allah will give you tawfiq to face it with dignity and then not fail, rather succeed and pass the test. That is what this hadith is all about. So there are people who come up with this excuse saying that avoiding sins, avoiding certain types of haram is difficult. Of course, because of the temptation of the nafs, because of the pressure at times, and because of the environment a person finds himself in. But when you yourself discipline your nafs, your soul, and saying this to yourself, the goal through all of this is that it is to make me a better person. It is to make me a better person. So I got to pass this test. Because we do not oftentimes see or consider the religious restrictions or religious ahkam as a test to one's soul, as a test to one's sabr, as a test to one's iman, We do not see that. We just see it sometimes as burdensome, sometimes just as a religious ruling, and therefore we often fail that. So going back to what I said, although it is going to be a challenge to avoid certain types of sins more than the other, but the point is, it is not impossible. It is not extremely difficult. And I gave you the example, in the month of Ramadan, we proved to ourselves, when I can not one day or for 1 week, for a whole month, for long hours, especially during daytime, many of you, mashallah, worked as usual, as normal for the whole shift, right? And yet you made sure that you avoided food and drink, which is so essential to your survival, which gives you this message: when you can avoid, when you can make this sacrifice, then avoiding sin is certainly not as difficult as that. Not as difficult, as hard as that. So you have to set your mind properly. And it is all about the mindset of the person at the end of the day. Right? It is all about the mindset. And I have examples of, mashallah, youngsters and people, despite having the pressure, despite finding themselves in the very difficult environment, they stood very strong. They stood very strong. And there are some examples of, mashallah, some sisters who converted to Islam. Their parents forced them, for example, to eat or drink something which is haram. They said, look, my religion, as it requires me to be very committed to serving you, at the same time requires me to stay away from certain things. And therefore, my service and muhabbat and love is for you there. It's there for you. But I cannot cross my boundaries. If you will force me, then I will leave. So there are people of this determination that we find among ourselves. So we need to look at examples like this. The sad tragedy is that we do not have people who would remind me of the values of Iman. We generally have people who unfortunately are calling us to dunya and the things of the dunya. And we often associate ourselves with them, therefore we become one of them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Holy Quran says, Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu ittaqullaha wa kunu ma'as sadiqin. So, O people of Iman, become a people of piety, and be with the people of Sadq. And ulama, they say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, why did he say kunu ma'as sadiqin? Because you cannot learn truth unless you are with the people of truth. Because talk is cheap at the end of the day. But when you see people who have unwavering commitment to their values, it teaches you so much. And then it gives you the strength. When they were able to do, I am also as a human being can certainly do that. Otherwise, the beautiful teachings and the stories that are there in our deen, we tend to consider them as a feeble of the past, something that these people, for example, they were genius or they live in a different time and era, they were able to do, we are not able to do. So the real examples and lives of people will help us even to overcome our own negativity in this regard. And therefore, my dear brothers and sisters, what we are discussing today, the topic is about maharim of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And what, in the other words, maharim are known as the ma'asi of Allah, things that are sinful. One of the scholars said this age that we live in is the age of sickness and sin. Because the type of sickness that we have become, subhanAllah, aware of, it wasn't the case in the past, whether it is this or that. And each day, new medical discovery and new medical research brings to our attention some new viruses and variant and whatnot. So it has really, subhanAllah, expressed and shown to us the vulnerability of human physicality and existence. And so this is the threat to physical self of the person. And the age of sin, of course, it is a threat to one's spirituality. And the prevalence of sin, as we see in our time, and all around, day in, day out, day and night, it shows the proliferation of this lifestyle, lewd and secular and liberal lifestyle. People who have zero consideration, not to just religion, even to their own values and to their own traditions, that their own ancestors and their own forefathers were very much cautious of, right? So this is the age that we live in, and as we live in this age, so what is our prime responsibility as the people of Iman? That as much as we care for our physical self, we make sure that we eat healthy, we do exercise, and we do whatever it takes to keep ourselves healthier with a stronger immunity, right? But what are we doing to take care of our spirituality, to our soul? Because to Ahlul Iman, as much as it is important to maintain their health, is a lot more important to maintain their Iman. And what is detrimental to the Iman and spirituality, in light of the hadith that I have quoted to you, is this ma'asi, sin, because this is going to, it's like a poison to your soul. It's like a poison to your soul. This is why Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he said, a believer, whether it is a small sin, minor sin, or major, he considers that as like a huge mountain hanging on his head that could fall and crush him any time. And then he says that the munafiqeen, he did not even talk about the disbelievers. He said munafiqeen, those who pretend to be believers, but they are not believers. So we need to see, in light of this, where do we stand in terms of our spirituality. Munafiqeen are the one that they see dhunub and ma'asi like a fly that sits on their nose, and they do like this and it flies away. So you get a momentary discomfort, and then you go with the flow of the desire, and then you ignore that. This is to our youngsters and youth, whether it is listening to haram or looking at haram or speaking of haram or entertaining any haram in general. You do get, because this is the word from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, some kind of discomfort in your heart for a moment. Because you want to make sure that no one is watching you. No one that you are seen as a person of esteem is around you. This in itself is an indication that you want anyone who is of a person of dignity to see you. And what about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? The one who created you, the one who sustained you, the one who blessed you with many blessings. This is why Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, she says, subhanAllah, she says that أَقِلُّ مِنَ الذُّنُوبِ. Of course, as one of the scholars said, as a human being, it is impossible to be sinless, because we are human beings. We are going to somehow commit mistakes, do things by default as a human nature. But what is important, which Aisha radiallahu anha, she says, because it is important for you to reduce and continue to reduce the burden of sins from your account, from your life. Because you cannot meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with anything better than having less sin in your account. Because then she says, you don't have any haya to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala violating all of His orders, right and left. And then meeting Him, expecting Him to forgive you and give you ajr. What kind of haya do you have? You don't even have this type of audacity to meet your parents. Right? So if that is the case, she says, constantly work on reducing the sins. And this is why the writer says, it is not possible for us to be sinless, but we can certainly sin less. Right? We can certainly reduce this. It is absolutely possible. And many of the things, I need to look at my own activities. You need to look at your own and screen through. You will find like 80 to 90% of the things you could have easily avoided. 80 to 90%. Right? So start working from that. Things that were easily avoidable, start avoiding that first. And build your iman and strength from that to get to the level which you have a stronger iman, stronger spirituality, and then work on these things and sins that you have found difficult to, for example, shun or to avoid. Because of this, of your build-up iman, inshallah, you will find your journey and transition easy. And there are two or three things that we need to be very cautious of, and I want to end with this. The sins, of course, there are many types and kinds, but there are the sins that are very prevalent in our time. That young and old, men and women, that easily engage and involved is, three organs of our body. Number one refers to our sight. Number two refers to our tongue. Number three refers to our hearing. So these are, and in fact, Imam Ghazali rahimahullah ta'ala says, آفات اللسان كثيرة. One of the scholars, he enumerated the sins that are related to our tongue and said they come about 40 to 80. Because many of the sins that are related to our tongue, whether it is gossiping, backbiting, or lying, etc., slandering, right? So this is why as-sukutu and an-najatu fi sukut. Your salvation lies
in remaining silent as much as possible. So we see that being a talkative person is something of pride, is something of honor. No, because Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam kana tawil as-samt. He would only speak when there is a need. I see sometimes when people are sitting together, it happened even with me, gatherings, some people ask me a question. So this individual asked me the question, but there was another person sitting, although he's not even a scholar, he started replying to that question. This shows the level, right? He did not even ask you first and foremost. Second, if he were to ask you, are you qualified to even reply? This shows that how we have detracted ourselves. So controlling our tongue, this saves you from many, 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 many harms in your personal relationship, with your spousal relationship, and etc., etc. Right? But there is the issue of talaq, and all of that is as a result of the abuse of the tongue. And the second one is, of course, relates to our eyesight. Looking at haram, as weather gets better day by day, we will see this fitna around us, especially to our dear youth. Learn to lower the gaze, and parents need to teach their children to lower their gaze. And Rasulullah ﷺ has promised the strength of iman, an increase of iman, and the halawatul iman, the moment you lower your gaze in the face of the fitna. And you will see that yourself. But if you fall prey to this, then it doesn't end, it will lead you to another sin, a major one, and finally it will get a person into zina. And the third is listening to haram, whether it is music, and not just meaning music, even listening to something that is unlawful as lying or even gossiping and whatnot. There are many, many stories, and example time doesn't permit me to go into, but the point being, all what I have said is to make us realize the enormity, the destructive nature of sins in the hayat of mu'min, in the life of Muslim. And we live in a very polluted environment of, licentiousness and sinfulness. And therefore, our task day to day should be, how can I avoid sins? And as I said, we live in this age of sickness and sin. As much as we are cautious and careful of giving the good diet to our body, we need to be extra cautious in terms of giving the good, healthy dose to our soul. And that is going to be through dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through maharim, through the sinful acts that we need to avoid, and all of that. We hope and pray, as we prove to ourselves in the month of Ramadan, that two things. One is that I can sacrifice food and drink, and I can stay away from haram. Certainly we can do that even after the month of Ramadan. We hope and pray that may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to benefit from what I have said and to act upon what have been discussed. Amin ya Rabbil Alameen. Subhanallah bihamdihi, subhanakallahumma bihamdik, wa nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, wa nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun, wa salamun ala al-mursalin, walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa